Hello and welcome to Decoded Worldview. Today, we delve deep into the recent protests erupting in Los Angeles over the federal immigration crackdown. We'll break down what happened, why it matters, and what to watch next. In early June 2025, a series of targeted ICE raids in Los Angeles led to the arrest of dozens of undocumented immigrants. Almost immediately, large crowds formed near detention centers and key downtown areas, expressing outrage over perceived heavy-handed tactics by federal agents. Protesters, many waving Mexican and Central American flags, decried raids that they argue sow fear in immigrant communities and violate basic human rights. As demonstrations swelled, the Trump administration responded by deploying National Guard troops and Marines to the city, reportedly nearly 5,000 personnel, to protect federal property and support ICE operations without state approval, marking a rare unilateral military action in a U.S. city. This move has been described by legal experts as unprecedented in recent decades and has intensified debates over federal versus state authority in managing civil unrest. Local leadership swiftly condemned the deployment. Mayor Karen Bass labeled Los Angeles a test case for federal overreach, arguing that militarizing immigrant communities undermines trust and public safety. Governor Gavin Newsom called the troop deployment illegal and filed a lawsuit to block it, asserting that California's consent was neither sought nor granted. These legal challenges underscore broader tensions between federal and state governments in the current political climate. On the ground, protests stayed mostly peaceful with organized marches near the Metropolitan Detention Center. But clashes broke out as some vandalized property, set fire to empty self-driving cars, and blocked highways. In response, law enforcement used tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbangs to control the crowd. Journalists covering the events reported injuries, raising serious concerns about press freedom and the right to document public demonstrations. Beyond local impacts, these protests have international resonance. Los Angeles, a global cultural hub preparing for the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Olympics, faces reputational risks as images of unrest and heavy-handed tactics circulate worldwide. Tourism and foreign investment stakeholders are watching closely, questioning how the city can balance security concerns with maintaining its image as an open, multicultural metropolis. Nationally, civil liberties organizations warn that using military forces in domestic protest settings sets a dangerous precedent and may chill free speech rights. On the other hand, federal officials argue that protecting federal buildings and personnel justifies the deployment, especially amid clashes that occasionally turn violent. This clash of narratives reflects deeper partisan divides over immigration policy, federal power, and the role of protest in democracy. More protests are planned in cities nationwide, showing this isn't just about Los Angeles, but part of a growing movement against harsh immigration enforcement. Legal fights over troop deployment may set key precedents on the Insurrection Act and limits of executive power. Community leaders stress peaceful dialogue and public pressure as the way forward, urging reform over conflict to avoid further escalation. As we continue to monitor these developments, ask yourself, what balance should exist between enforcing immigration laws and protecting civil liberties? How should local and federal authorities coordinate in handling protests? Now, let's broaden our focus to related developments across Latin America, beginning with Mexico's persistent cartel violence and its wider implications. In recent days, the U.S. Treasury imposed new sanctions on Los Chapitos, a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, designating them for their role in fentanyl trafficking and freezing assets linked to Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's sons. On the ground in Mexico, violence tied to cartels remains severe. A recent cross-border shootout near Guatemala saw state police kill armed suspects, pursuing others briefly into Guatemalan territory, highlighting cartel wars spilling borders. Experts warn Jalisco new generation and Sinaloa adapt tactics, recruiting foreign mercenaries. These shifts exacerbate instability, displacement, and insecurity. Election-related violence in Mexico intensifies. Multiple mayoral candidates and local officials have been targeted and killed during campaign events. In Veracruz, a mayoral candidate and supporters were fatally shot at a rally, illustrating political violence linked to cartels. Hundreds of attacks on candidates reflect efforts to influence governance via intimidation or elimination. Consider reforms and protections. Parallels emerge in other Latin American countries. In Colombia, a teenage assailant shot presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe Tabri at a campaign event, leaving him critically wounded. Reports suggest a minor hired as a hitman, revealing how crime tactics exploit youth and complicate law enforcement. This episode underscores political violence's regional nature and challenges posed by youth involvement in crime. Cartel operations extend deep societal impacts. Communities suffer extortion, forced recruitment, and violence disrupting daily life. Reports show cartels coerce young people as lookouts or foot soldiers, perpetuating exploitation cycles fueling instability. Civil society advocates comprehensive strategies combining law enforcement, social programs, and regional cooperation to address root causes like poverty, lack of opportunity, and weak institutions. Regarding policy responses, Mexico's federal government deploys security forces to hotspots, but critics argue punitive approaches alone fail. Collaborative efforts, U.est, Mexico intelligence sharing, joint operations against trafficking routes, and financial measures targeting money laundering, aim to undermine cartels. Local governments experiment with community policing and preventive measures. Consider the balance between enforcement and community-oriented interventions. President Trump's new travel ban on 12 countries took effect June 9 again, reviving a policy. Meanwhile, ICE raids in Los Angeles netted over 100 arrests last weekend, sparking clashes on the streets as National Guard troops were sent in. California Governor Gavin Newsom said the deployment was unnecessary and would only inflame tensions. UN Rights Chief Volker Turk warned the sweeping ban raises serious international law concerns. Meanwhile, ACLU lawyer Hina Shamsi said deploying the National Guard to break up protests is a dangerous abuse of power that undermines the rule barring the military from policing civilians. She warned that this escalatory response is reckless since federal troops aren't trained for crowd control and could cause civilian casualties. California has already sued to block the deployment, arguing it violates federal law and state sovereignty for now. Mexico's security crisis is deepening. Reuters notes that scores of local political candidates have been assassinated nationwide. Mexico City also saw a brazen attack. 2 aides to Mayor Clara Brugada were gunned down in late May 2025, an ambush immediately linked to the Jalisco New Generation cartel. President Claudia Sheinbaum called the killings deplorable and pledged federal support. Brugada vowed they would not go unpunished now. In Ecuador, President Daniel Noboa has also moved aggressively against crime. He declared an internal armed conflict on gangs in January, and on June 7 his government won assembly approval for sweeping new security laws giving police and military expanded powers. Noboa has even deployed troops into cities and sought U.S. support. Legislators recently backed amending the Constitution to allow U.S. bases on Ecuadorian soil, a major policy reversal. U.S. The federal government confirmed it has deployed 2,000 more National Guard troops and 700 active-duty Marines to Los Angeles. This brings the total force on the ground to nearly 4,800, surrounding key areas like the Metropolitan Detention Center and city government buildings. Protest organizers say this escalation is excessive, while civil rights groups warn it sets a dangerous precedent. Tensions are still high in downtown streets. Live footage from local news channels showed military convoys entering South LA and Skid Row, raising concerns about the targeting of vulnerable communities. Protesters, mostly peaceful, continued marching along Broadway and Temple Street. However, small groups of masked individuals reportedly attempted to block traffic near the 101 freeway. Police responded with flashbangs and rubber bullets, pushing crowds back toward Pershing Square. According to LAPD Chief McDonnell, the military deployment has created logistical strain, with command and control issues between city officers and federal troops. He stated that, while order is the goal, overlapping jurisdictions risk chaos. Several journalists were again detained near protest zones despite wearing visible press credentials. The LA Press Freedom Coalition has filed emergency motions, citing First Amendment violations. Thank you for watching. This is Decoded Worldview. Don't worry, it's a joke. See you in the